what we believe is a suitable product for our clients, and that's what we recommend to them. That's a great strategy. I happen to believe there's not one that's right or wrong. It's a matter of choice for the client, which way they want to compensate their advisor. So basically the Department of Labor is only talking about qualified retirement plans. So everything else that you do that's not a qualified retirement plan would not apply to this rule that they're proposing. But they are wanting to say that we are all fiduciaries. So we all need to operate with what they say is the best interest of the client. I happen to believe I already do that. I operate in the best interest of my clients every day. Try to recommend to them the best possible product, and we go from there. Unfortunately, they don't really see it that way. They're actually moving in a different direction, and the rule is very, I believe, constricting as to how we're going to do business in the future. I'm going to talk a little bit about the way the rule was written and proposed last summer. It was released, and we have a lot of concerns about it. But essentially that rule says that you need to sign a best interest contract if you are going to get paid a commission on any qualified retirement plan. That would include upfront charges on A-share business that you do in mutual funds, annuities, if you have any qualified plans that you use annuities for, whether that's variable, indexed, fixed. You're going to have some sort of contract saying that you're acting in the best interest of the client. Now, most of us say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the contract is really cumbersome. I believe it's going to be a fairly thick document that we have to have our client sign. There's a bunch of warranties they are requiring to be in that contract, or at least initially proposed that they had to be in that contract. And those warranties talk about past performance, and they actually want us to project the potential future performance, which we all know is not okay. The SEC and FINRA doesn't allow us to do that. But that's part of what I think is a huge red flag on this rule, is that there's some conflicting things that are not being really checked with the SEC and FINRA. So, when do we have to get that contract signed? Well, the original rule said that we had to get it signed at the point of product discussion. So I could be at a dinner party having a conversation with someone, a friend of mine, and they talk to me and ask me, where would you put that? And as soon as I start talking about a product, a specific mutual fund, a specific annuity, I would have to stop and have them sign a contract, because then it's no longer education, it's advice. So we pointed that out to them too. We said, how is that possible? We may be talking different products for several appointments, maybe several weeks, several months, before we get to the point of execution. Why would we sign contracts? Because every product has to have a signed contract. It's not just for the general information. So I believe they recognized that. They said that they would consider changing that piece of the rule to be at the time of execution when you sign paperwork. But then they would have to use and go back and use the advice that you used to get there, and that would be included in that contract at that point. I said, I'm fine with that. I just don't want to sign 5 contracts and maybe only write one piece of business. So, when do you sign it is a big point of contention on the rule. Do you have to go back and sign contracts for existing business? The original rules had nothing to do with when you had a client. So if someone's putting, say, $100 a month into a mutual fund, would I then have to go back and get a signed contract? That has to be clarified, because at this point, the answer is yes, according to the original rule. Now, they may allow us to use a disclosure. That's what they talked about when we were meeting with them, where we disclose to existing clients with qualified plans. Then I am now acting in your best interest. I always have been, but I'm stating it now in this document, in this disclosure. From here going forward, I will be acting as a fiduciary. The other real concern I have with the original rule is, how long does it go? If I retire 20 years from now, am I still responsible for advice I gave 20 years earlier? What if I'm no longer an advisor? Am I still held responsible for that advice? There really was no end date or contemplated end date in the original rule. So there's a significant number of concerns that we have around the Department of Labor rule. And I would say, at this point, there's likely going to be a Department of Labor rule. We aren't going to be able to stop it because this is happening in a regulatory agency. It's not happening in Congress, it's happening in an agency. And they can go final with this rule, and we have to go and implement it because there's not a whole lot of ways for us to stop it at this point. There are some possibilities. If you remember last year, at the end of the year, when Congress was getting ready to go home, and they were talking about the omnibus bill and funding the government and whether or not we'd have a shutdown, there was some discussion about having the Department of Labor defunded for this particular product, and it was going to be attached to that omnibus bill. That never happened. We were hopeful that that might get attached. There was some concern that it would be vetoed if it were attached, and that the government might have been shut down. So they made the decision to pull it off and keep that omnibus bill clean. So that was one option we had to try to stop this. Another option we have is potentially a legislative alternative. There's some great advocates we have in Congress right now that are interested in trying to help us get this right. They agree that we should be working in the best interest of our clients all the time. They understand what the Department of Labor is trying to do, but they also understand how much it ties our hands and how we may not be able to continue to do business as we have in the past if this rule goes through. The legislative alternative has some possibilities. The problem with that is it's got to pass the House, it's got to pass the Senate, and it's got to be veto-proof. That's a huge stretch for us right now. The administration, President Obama, is very interested in getting this rule done before he leaves office. And so his goal is to try to make sure it's finished, wrapped up, and done, and actually fully executed, which means they're going to try to get this rule done by the first quarter, and then we'll have about 8 to 9 months to implement it before the end of the year. By January 2017, they want to have it all in place and done. So the legislative alternative may not go very far. So now at this point, we have to hope that all of the work we did last summer, I testified in front of the Department of Labor, testified in front of the House Financial Services, will cover all products. Makes a lot of sense that maybe they would be the ones to go first. Unfortunately, they're not where they need to be on that rule yet. So it's kind of hard to get them to play together when they don't want to. Yes, Joe.
I've always had a difficult time trying to understand what jurisdiction does the Department of Labor have to our industry?
Well, they currently regulate via ERISA all 401k plans, and so they are making, I think, a bit of a stretch in grabbing IRAs. I have my own personal theories, and I probably shouldn't share those from up here. But they are definitely interested in continuing to control all qualified money in the country. Maybe not under ERISA rules, but they definitely want to have jurisdiction over all qualified money. Because if you think of where does the 401k money go, it goes to the IRA market after people retire. And they're seeing a lot of money flow out of 401ks as baby boomers retire with significant nest eggs, and they want to continue to have jurisdiction over those funds. So that's my politically correct answer, and I'll give you a different one later if you want me to. Yeah, John?
When we were in Washington last year, there was a lot of talk, as you mentioned, about not funding this.
Yeah.
But nobody that I can recall has given us a feel for what funding this would cost us.
The industry or what it's going to cost the Department of Labor?
Department of Labor. I'm assuming they aren't ready to go to implement, staffed up, and
No, they're not, and I have not seen anyone make that kind of estimate, John. I've seen estimates, very rough estimates of what it's going to cost the industry to implement this, but not what it's going to cost the Department of Labor. But I guarantee you, it's going to cost them a lot more funds to staff up and be ready to handle the things that are going to come out of this. Yeah, Wayne?
Julie, is there anything that we as members should be doing now?
Absolutely. Great. You just laid that one up for me. Members and non-members. First of all, we need everybody to join NAFA because we have to have a unified front on this. It is a critical, I believe this is a deal breaker for our industry. If you think about the amount of business you do in IRAs, any qualified plans, it's significant. So as a NAFA member, we need you to be paying attention. We are going to have times where we're going to need you to respond to action alerts. We're going to get you an email. It takes seconds for you to click, put in your zip code and your address, and boom, your senator and your Congress people get a message from you immediately. We need everyone to respond to those. We also need you to help us by coming to the National Congressional Conference in Washington, D.C., May 24th and 25th. If it's not on your calendar, please add it to your calendar because we will need to be there making some noise. And legislators are listening. We have a lot of bipartisan support on this in Washington, and my expectation is that's what we're going to need, especially if this legislative alternative is going to get any traction. We have to have it be veto-proof, which means we have to have a whole lot of support, and we aren't where we need to be on that legislative alternative. So active involvement, even if you're not a political person. I am not a political person, but the more involved I got in NAFA, the more political I became. So the only way I know to make an impact and protect our industry well is by each and every one of us getting involved and sharing our concerns with Washington politicians. I just want to say one other thing. The biggest concern I have with this rule is it could potentially preclude us from working with small accounts. If you think about having someone sign a contract saying you're acting in their best interest and they're only putting $100 into their simple IRA every month, we don't make a lot of money on that, right? We have a huge amount more of compliance costs, and we now have a much bigger liability cost. Our E&O insurance is probably going to go up. So there is going to be, my fear, a time when we're not going to be able to handle those small accounts anymore. And 80% of my business is small accounts, stuff that I do with small businesses. So we have to be allowed, we have to pay attention, we have to be ready to fight, because this could change our industry forever. I'm getting the high sign in the back that I have to close this, but I'm going to be here this morning. If you have any questions or want to talk more about it, I'd be happy to do that. But please pay attention to what's going on with the Department of Labor. It's a critical issue that we all have to stand together on. So thank you. If you're not here, you're missing out.